Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Ideas at Work and Beyond. I am so thrilled about this evening's show because it's going to be informative, it's going to be entertaining, and we have a chance to meet three young men. I can call them young because I'm getting up in age. Three young men that, in the words of Teddy Roosevelt, are in the arena. Now, I should memorize this poem. It was actually a speech he gave, but he talked about how the courage of being in the arena, the man who knows the great thrill of victory and the agony of defeat, and he won't be on the sideline with those timid souls that know neither victory nor defeat. We have young men here today that are running for the United States Congress. These are an incredibly qualified, educated, talented group of people that you're going to be able to meet tonight. One of these guys played football at Notre Dame. If you ever seen the movie Rudy, it was kind of patterned after his life. Another guy went to Galdang Harvard. I don't know, I might be easily impressed, but still, you know, the Ivy League schools impress me. But to trump that, we got a guy tonight who's running for the U.S. Congress that actually spent time in Oxford. I mean, that's like Chariots of Fire stuff. I mean, that's like intellect you can't believe. But without any further ado, it is my thrill to introduce to you Rob Merkel, Dan DiBasella, and Will Gregory, all three Republican candidates for the 4th Congressional District. That was previously held by someone named Chris Shays, who moved to Rhode Island. But he's back. But he's running for governor. One of these three men are going to represent the Republican Party in the 4th Congressional District. And tonight, you have an opportunity to hear from them. You have an opportunity to call in and ask some questions. And you have an opportunity to come to a conclusion for yourself as to who would be the best representative for you in Washington, D.C. Before we came on the show, because we've had vast preparation for this show, we had a drawing of straws to see who would go first, and I believe you have the first 1-minute introduction, and then we'll go down and we'll take it from there. So, Rob.
Outstanding. Thanks, Marty. My name is Rob Merkel. I live in Norwalk, and I'm running for Congress, 4th District. The reason I got into this campaign is I was refused to be part of the generation that is about to leave this country in worse shape than we found it. And fundamentally, I think the reason that's happening is because government is out of control. They've gone far beyond their constitutional mandate in terms of what they're involved with. They're taxing us uncontrollably. They're spending money uncontrollably. And they need to be reined in. And I think if we look at the mandates of New Jersey, Virginia, what almost happened in New York 23, and certainly what happened in Massachusetts, the people are standing up against big government. And I think what we need now is not another politician, but someone who's an actual businessman that knows how to put people to work, that knows what it's like to shop for insurance for their employees, and deal with the government bureaucracy. And I'm that guy.
Thank you very much. Will? Can I let the cat out of the bag? You're the Oxford guy.
I am indeed the Oxford guy. I'm running for Congress because we need real change in our political process. We need fresh thinking, fresh blood, and a fresh start. You know, while Republicans controlled the Congress, both houses, the Senate and the House of Representatives, as well as the White House, we ran up massive deficits. We expanded the size of government. We need somebody that's going to go in there and say, you know what, enough is enough, both within our own party and in Congress as a whole. That's exactly what I'll do. I plan on going in there and really speaking to the core principles that make America America. Freedom of enterprise, self-determination, individual liberty. But these are things that we've really been walking away from as a whole over the past several years. I don't think that's okay. My aim is to get us back to our core ideals and also to get the Republican Party as a whole back on track.
Great. Dan?
No, thanks, Marty. Thanks for having us.
Sure.
You know, I'm the state senator for the eastern part of Fairfield County, Shelton, Stratford, and Monroe. A businessman by training, worked for companies like Pepsi and the Hartford. And the reason I'm running is I think there is a very distinct choice that we are going to need to make as a country this fall. And that's, do we like the direction that Nancy Pelosi and Jim Himes are bringing us? That the answer to all our problems is more government. Auto industry's in trouble, government should take it over. Banks are in trouble, government should take it over. Healthcare's in trouble, government should take it over. I think that's the wrong direction for our country. I actually think there's a better way. There's a way of bringing back the values of small government, free enterprise, and individual liberty to Washington, D.C. Whether it's in the economy, where we should repeal the stimulus package that was passed and pass a tax cut instead to get this economy moving, whether it's on health care, where we should scrap the bills that have been proposed and start again on what both Democrats and Republicans both agree upon to lower costs. So over the course of tonight, we'll hopefully lay out that alternative vision to contrast with Jim Himes and Nancy Pelosi and where they've been heading this, taking our country down the wrong path.
Thank you. Jim Himes, speaking of Jim Himes, depending on what poll you've heard, his approval ratings are either in the sort of middle to high 30s or low 40s. That being the case, people interested in running for this seat is expanding right before our very eyes, because Rob Russo has joined us fresh off the highways and the byways, and you too are a candidate, and I'm just glad you could make it. And if you just give us a 1-minute introduction, and then we'll forge ahead with some questions.
Certainly, and thanks for having me, and my apologies to all of you for being late. I can't blame it on traffic, which is a rarity in Fairfield County, but the bottom line, as you've heard from my friends here, is that Congress has failed us, and Jim Himes has failed us. The Congress has been on an amazing spending spree with our money, and Himes has signed on for the whole boat. Well, you know what? You can't create jobs when we're borrowing more than a quarter of the national budget. You can't create jobs when you're mortgaging our future to the Chinese who are buying our debt. You can't create jobs when you're raising the debt ceiling to $1.9 trillion. And that's what Congress should be focused on right now, and they're not. And the bottom line is, we can't afford another 2 years at Jim Himes. Now, we all agree what the problems are, but we need a candidate that can win this sucker. Okay? Now, having worked for Governor Arell and Chris Shays, I know this district and I know the towns in this district better than any candidate sitting up here. And as the former Republican state senator from Bridgeport, I know what it takes to win in the toughest parts of this district. This country cannot afford to continue to allow this Democrat Congress to bankrupt us. And anybody out there, including Jim Himes, who thinks that this will end positively, or frankly in any way other than poorly, is either being irresponsible or lying. And we need to stop it immediately.
All right. Well, thanks a lot. Those are our 4 candidates. Now I'd like to introduce our panel of experts, of political gurus. These people have flown in from all over the country to be with us. But we have Al Robinson, founder and publisher of Hat City Blog. We have Matt Grimes, among other things, a political activist par excellence, and he's a savant when it comes to the minutia of Connecticut politics. And we have Bob Cernak, who, among other things, hosts a television show Common Sense, and he has also provided this table that we're talking on right now. But you have a question for the candidates, so we'll start with Matt.
Okay, good evening, gentlemen. One of the areas that Congressman Shays and Congressman Himes have differed on is foreign affairs. I mean, Chris's knowledge was very well respected when he was in the House when it came to foreign affairs. Today, President Ahmadinejad of Iran bragged about the enriched uranium levels in his supply, and about how he said that Iran is not going to be, quote, bullied or coerced by the West. My 2 questions, I guess, for the folks on the panel is, or for our candidates, is Iran a threat to the United States? And 2, what should Congress do differently in terms of the war on terror than the current Congress under Nancy Pelosi is doing?
Okay, we'll start with Rob and do the same order. Go right ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, I do believe that Iran is a threat, a very real threat. They're effectively a terrorist regime, and they are killing their own people. And if we look at the stability that we're trying to create in that region, Israel is our closest ally, and we need to back their play. You can't allow a madman like Ahmadinejad to possess nuclear weapons. He will use them, and he's actually put out a bounty on U.S. citizens, any terrorist acts of, I think, $20 million. Now, in terms of what the Congress can do is actually fund our military. And when the military asks for specific assets to fight, give them those assets to fight. We don't need to bring this stuff into the daylight to see how our operations actually function, but fund them appropriately so they can get their job done.
Will?
Well, actually, the topic that you brought up is quite near and dear to my heart. My background is in foreign relations. While I was at Oxford, I studied international relations and global governance and diplomacy. Iran is a threat, absolutely, not only to regional allies, but to, going further into Europe. Now, one of the things that we need to do, and this is something that I haven't heard many people talk about, but is engage the average people within Iran. The average age of an Iranian is 26 years old, and the young people in that country are incredibly disenchanted with the government there. We need to do what we can to support them to bypass the government and to ensure that they have the capacity to, if necessary, and I believe that we're really approaching that area very rapidly, push for a revolution that ideally will be peaceful. We need to really step up track two.
No, that's good. I don't peaceful. Dan, go ahead.
I think we're all going to agree on this, is that Iran is a huge threat, and what we need to do is we need to start ratcheting up the heat to make sure that they do not get nuclear weapons. And I think we can't take anything off the table. You start with diplomacy and you try to get them to actually stop. If that fails, you very quickly go to economic sanctions, and if that fails, you use limited military strikes to take out their nuclear capability. We cannot allow Iran to threaten the United States or our allies by obtaining a nuclear weapon, and we can't take anything off the table as we start to turn up the heat on them.
I think militarily, I think Israel might be willing to help in that as well. Rob, on Iran?
The bottom line is the United States is weary because of the wars we're fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, but frankly, that's no reason to ignore a dictator who could be very, very dangerous. In modern history, we have a bad tendency of ignoring tyrants before it's too late, and we have to act quickly on Iran. There's no doubt about it. He's a threat to the democracy that is Israel. He is a threat to our efforts to build democracy in Iraq. And you asked, what can Congress do? I think one thing that Congress can do is make sure that the generals have the equipment and the supplies that they want, not the equipment and the supplies that the defense industry thinks they need. I think too often we're still building a military to refight World War II, and not the military we need to be successful in new modern warfare. And I think Congress needs to listen to its generals.
Okay, caller, you're on the air. You had a question for the candidates?
I have a question for the candidates. Candidates, good evening. Thanks for showing up. I hope you come by more often and answer our questions. Listen, your opponent, Congressman Himes, he supports this cap and trade nonsense for some reason, all right? He supports Barack Obama's plans for taxing working class people and businesses on energy that we use. Would you please explain how that's going to hurt all the homeowners that are listening right now, people, small businessmen, and I fail to understand how it's going to reduce pollution, because we still need the energy, and they're not giving us any other alternative energy to use that doesn't use carbon. So do you support this cap and trade?
Excellent question. Thanks a lot. Kneecap and trade. Rob, we'll start with you. What are your thoughts?
Absolutely not. I think it's a very bad idea. It's a model that was tried in Europe.
Can you give us a 10-second primer on what the heck this is?
Sure. What they're trying to do is they're going to set a limit of carbon emissions at a certain date and time, and then they're going to look at companies and say, if you emit less than that, you get a credit that you can sell to a company that creates more than that. So they're creating a tradable item, and what that does is it incurs a level of cost. So it's necessarily designed to increase the cost of electricity production by over 45%. And if you look at what happened in Europe when they instituted this, a few things happened. Number one, manufacturing jobs fled the EU because electricity is one of the highest costs of production. So they went to countries like China and India and Mexico that did not have environmental constraints. Second, utility costs went up through the roof because it was designed to do that. So individuals and businesses had their costs go exorbitantly higher, 35 to 45%, and at the end of the day, there was no reduction in carbon emissions. Carbon emissions actually went up. So this is a tax, plain and simple, and it's at the worst time in our history to incur it.
Well,
those who have followed my campaign would know that I believe very strongly in environmental stewardship, and that it's actually among the core principles that I list that I believe very firmly in. But this bill, cap and trade, has nothing to do with environmental stewardship. This is about redistributing wealth. This is about trying to increase taxes on average Americans. Well, we're in the middle of a terrible recession. The worst that we've seen in 70 years. Anybody knows that adding taxes during a time of recession is the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. And it's going to impact our small businesses. It's going to impact our ability to create jobs and to get our economy going back on track. This is the exact wrong thing to do, and this is the wrong time to be even examining doing this.
Dan.
Cap and trade, very simply, is a tax, right? The government is going to tax companies who's going to pass it on to homeowners. It is the wrong thing to do, and the Democrats like to hide taxes with fancy names, right? Like, cap and trade, a surcharge. They're taxes on families. There's a much better way to try to help our environment, and it's the way, by the way, that we will achieve energy independence as well. And that's by having the government give tax credits to private industry for alternative energy. All different types of alternative energy, from natural gas to nuclear to solar to tidal. Those are the things that are in the long run going to help us both with the environment and to get off foreign oil. Adding a tax on middle-class families is nothing more than the Democrats trying to expand government.
Rob. Seems to be a pattern here, Rob. No one's coming out for this.
And I'm not going to
roll the dice. Say you're in favor of it.
I'm sorry to say, cap and trade, it's like penance.
Okay.
People are just going to pay the fine and continue to pollute. You're never going to be able to tax people out of polluting. People aren't going to stop driving gas guzzlers because of a tax. They're going to stop driving gas guzzlers because business has been encouraged by the government to actually develop new and innovative green technologies, is the bottom line. Okay. And so that's where we should be focused on, is how we can grow our green economy. It's not just about the environment. It's also about we're continuing to be an industry leader.
Okay. Al, you had a question?
Yeah.
By the way, Al Robinson, Google Hat City blog. There's more stuff on that website than you can imagine.
Yeah, a few things. First of all, Marty, after the show, show me that poll about Heinz being in that percentage. I'd like to check that out.
I gave it a spectrum. It was high 39,
I just like to see that poll. I got the computer here. I haven't come across it yet.
I've got some polling numbers I'd be more than happy to show.
Western Watts. Mitt Romney says hello about Western Watts, by the way. Yeah. All right, question, guys. You got four individuals here. You got this kumbaya moment here, but let's be realistic. You have a convention coming up in a few months, and you got a primary coming up after that. It's nice to talk about Jim Hines, but right now it has to be about who's going to be the person who's going to be representing the Republican Party going forward in the general election. So each one of you guys right now, tell me why you feel you would be the best choice for that position, and why you're better than your opponents. So please.
Start with Rob, because we're continuing that sequence. Rob?
Sure. Well, I think it comes down to a philosophy of politician and big government versus business and individuals. I'm not a politician. I'm not one who's a fan of big government. I think we should go back to the constitutional limits that our federal government should have, and you don't hear that coming out of politicians these days. They're for increased taxes, increased spread. I mean, look at the federal government, the government in Connecticut, for instance. My business is putting people to work. I know how to create jobs. I know the pain of a small businessman. I'm one of the people, and the grassroots organizations are backing me, just like they did with Scott Brown in Massachusetts, and in New Jersey and Virginia. So I think I'm what the people want. They don't want another politician today.
Will, are you another politician?
Absolutely not. I'm actually glad that Rob mentioned that, because I'm not a politician. I run a small nonprofit organization, and it's very similar to running a small business. I have to jump through the legal hurdles that the government establishes, all the laws that they try to set up. I have to work through, and I recognize that to get our economy back on track, to get people working again, we need to enable small business owners to have an environment where they can thrive. Government isn't doing that. Now, people are really upset with what's going on, as am I. That's why I'm doing this. But what differentiates me is that I'm able to, I'm speaking about getting back to our core principles and really trying to get the party back to where it once stood. So I do believe that the base will be in favor of what I'm saying, but I can also engage a lot of the voters that traditionally wouldn't vote conservative, the people who are under 30. I'm able to reach out to them and say, hey, you know what? We share common ground. No other candidate can do that. And I'm also able to reach out to a lot of moderates who have, over the past several years, really grown disenchanted with the Republican Party.
All right. Well, let's go to the old guy here.
Yeah.
Dan,
been in office for 3 years, so the old guy. Well, I actually think no matter which of the fellows up here are nominees, they're going to be Jim Himes. But the reason why I believe I'm the best candidate are 3 things. First is I'm the only candidate who doesn't just talk the talk, I've walked the walk. I've actually been up in Hartford where I proposed cutting spending by 5%, and it wasn't adopted because the Democrats have the majority. But I've been fighting the good fight. In my hometown of Shelton, when I was on the tax board, we lowered taxes by 8%. So I've actually done the things at a local and a state level that we want to do in Washington. Secondly is I'm the only candidate who's actually won a general election. And I've won it twice in a district that looks an awful lot like the 4th Congressional District. And third is I'm the only candidate with the support out there to actually take on Himes. I've had over 500 people donate to my campaign, raised more than 5 times my closest competitor, and I've received endorsements from over 50 mayors, for selectmen, legislators, and Republican Party officials from throughout the district. So you can judge me by my record, you can judge me by the winning of election that I've had, and you can judge me by the grassroots support and the party support that I've gotten to take on Jim Himes.
Rob.
When I won the state Senate seat and had the opportunity to represent Bridgeport, I won in a district that was 2-to-1 Democrat. We need somebody that really knows how to reach out in areas that are not as strong Republican in that manner. And when I got up to Hartford, admittedly was not for a long period of time, my #1 focus was to see that the Bridgeport Board of Education was audited because it was wasting $200 million a year of state taxpayer money. But the bottom line is, the first step to representing the 4th Congressional District is you need to know this district. You need to know what makes this district tick, what makes its businesses tick, what makes its towns unique. And whether it was serving as Chris Shays' Deputy Chief of Staff or the Director of Governor Rail's Fairfield County office, I know what makes the 4th Congressional District special. And I know how to represent it in Congress.
All right. Caller, you're on the air.
Yeah, thanks, Marty, for getting me on. How you doing tonight?
Good, good, good. Thanks. We have 4 candidates here for the 4th Congressional District. What's your question?
Well, I'm going to pose a question to them. It's the same question I posed to Jason Bartlett when I had lunch with him this week.
So wait. You're dining with Democrats during the week and asking questions of Republicans towards the end of the week. Is that correct?
I'm reaching out, Marty.
Okay.
So I'm gonna frame up the question, and the question is ultimately going to boil down to: so what's the plan for Connecticut, and what are we going to do to make Connecticut competitive and allow us to compete? But let me just frame it up on a big picture basis, if you don't mind, for a second.
Sure. You got 20 seconds.
How many?
20.
Okay, I'll be quick.
Okay.
To start with, I mean, we're in a situation right now where we have federal employees making twice the average annual income of people in the private sector. We have the highest corporate tax rates in the world, and we're competing against nations in Asia that have 5% corporate tax rates. 3 out of every $4 that the federal government's going to spend this year, they will print or borrow. Our deficit this year is going to be 20% of GDP. Everybody's been following the situation in Greece, which is a sideshow. They're only at 13%, 20%. We have a national debt, including legacy costs, of $70 trillion, and we're adding $2 trillion a year to that. We're competing against 150 million people in India and China that are currently unemployed and are lining up for jobs making less than $5,000 a year.
Dave, you're completely bumming me out here. Seriously. I don't even drink, but I'm thinking of taking it up. Just solidify this into a question.
Okay, I feel like right now We've got one party that's paddling over the falls. We've got the other party that's criticizing the way they're paddling, and you've got the American people that are paddling upstream by themselves. Our politicians are dancing on the deck of the Titanic. We need a big picture plan. So my question to each of the candidates there is, what's the big picture plan? How do you get us out of this mess?
I got it. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it very much. Okay, iceberg, what iceberg? Everything's going to be fine. What's your response? This guy's on the ledge here. We got to call him back. Tell him what you're going to do to fix it.
I think we're all on the ledge. And, you know, to be truthful, both parties have responsibility for what's been going on in terms of, you know, the deficit we have and the spending that's out of control. And I think there's a movement in the country to, first of all, scale back the federal government. If you get them back to their constitutional limited areas, you can cut the government by half. Now, it's not going to happen overnight. It's got to be incremental. We can implement specific mandates to reduce the size of budgets in government by 2 to 5% every year, mandatory. Make them find cost savings and eliminate fraud. Create jobs by putting liquidity into the private sector. The banks have $1 trillion in excess cash. Make them lend it to small businesses because they need the money. Allow them to get out there and do it. If the government gets out of the way, small business will start to create jobs again. 70% of the jobs are created in small business. We can start to return power to the states, eliminate corporate taxes, because you're right, we're at least a 9% disadvantage to the average corporate tax rate globally. And in Connecticut in particular, we have the third highest tax rate in the country. And by the way, we have more debt per capita than California.
Ouch. Will.
Well, you know, I think the caller brought up a lot of the critical issues that we're facing. I think that there are a number of things that we need to do. First of all, one thing that he mentioned quite early on that I was really happy he touched on was the fact that, you know, as we pull out of this recession, we're going to need to encourage companies to settle here in the U.S. to facilitate businesses developing, and a critical aspect of that is going to be cutting the corporate tax rate, which currently stands at 35%, to something that's much more reasonable. I think 10%, something, you know, a radical shift would be much more in line with something that would be competitive with a lot of the countries that are trying to pull away businesses to their home turf. Other things, though, we need to reform Washington. They're spending out of control. We need to make sure, you know, in my reform package that I proposed over the past several weeks, I suggested a balanced budget amendment similar to the one that was nearly passed in 1982 to make sure that the government lives within its means, just like every American household. We also need to, I'm getting the go-ahead, so I'll wrap that up. But
all right, just real quick, by a show of hands, who agrees with that previous caller that we really are in trouble here?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. Dan, answer his question.
No doubt we're in trouble. Two ideas, one short-term, one long-term. The short-term idea is we need to repeal the $500 billion in pork barrel stimulus that has not been spent yet. It is doing nothing to stimulate the economy. Let's repeal it and instead cut the payroll tax in half for a year. That'll put $1,500 in every middle-class family's pocket, give small businesses money to create jobs, and reduce the deficit by $150 billion because it's cheaper than the pork barrel stimulus. Long-term, we actually need a spending cap to force the politicians to make choices. One of the issues we've had is government's been growing by 7-8% a year, whether it's Democrats or Republicans who are in Congress. We should put a cap on that to no more, a maximum of population plus inflation growth. Because honestly, you're not going to cut the government in half unless you're proposing eliminating Social Security and Medicare, and I don't think Rob or anybody supports that. But we can actually stop the out-of-control spending that's going on, reduce it to a reasonable rate, and then from there, solve the deficit by 2016.
Rob.
I heard from this caller in his own drawn-out way a message that I'm hearing from people on all sides.
He had Titanic, he had Niagara Falls.
He said something more than that.
We got to call him back.
What I heard him say, really, was that he wants something really simple. He wants his government to be reasonable. And you know what? The idea that we could centralize health care for the entire nation in Washington, D.C. isn't reasonable. Then again, it's also not reasonable to stand out there and scream, "Get government out of Medicare." That's not reasonable either. It's not reasonable to spend $890 billion in a pork barrel bill of money that we don't have. But it's also not really reasonable to sit there and say, well, the entire Department of Education, we don't need that. We need to get back to old-fashioned core Republican principles of not spending money we don't have. We need to look for waste and inefficiencies that we can tone back. And frankly, he asked what we're going to do for the state of Connecticut. We need to pay less taxes to the federal government, because here in Connecticut, we're only getting 69 cents back on the dollar. Why are we paying the middleman to solve our problems when we could just as easily do it ourselves?
Host of Common Sense, Bob Cernick, you have a question for the candidates.
With respect to health care, we all know what the essential problem is, and that is that the costs are rising exponentially, and that there's upwards of 50 million uninsured people out there. What specific solutions do each of you propose to bridge that problem and solve it?
We'll start with Rob. Continue.
Well, first of all, there's a lot of reasons why costs are spiraling out of control, and not the least of which is the cost shifting that's occurring because the government's involvement in Medicare and Medicaid artificially suppressing costs that they're reimbursing to healthcare providers. So you basically have a surplus that's being pushed onto the private sector through insurance. The second thing is we have to look at what insurance is actually for. Back in the early 60s, 70s, and early 80s, before HMOs came around, insurance was for catastrophic things. Whereas now, people have the perception that it should cover everything. They want the $5 copay, they want doctor's visits they don't have to pay for ever. So they tend to use more than they need to. If we shift some of the responsibility on the patient with health savings accounts, for instance, if we open it up to competition, and the one thing that's not in both of these bills is tort reform. I've heard that 30% of procedures that are implemented in medicine today are defensive. And if you eliminate those, you free up roughly 30% of the resources in the system to cover ostensibly 15% of the population. That alone, simple economics, you now have an oversupply, you'll drop costs. And that comes through medical malpractice tort reform.
Will, what are you going to do to fix health care?
Well, I've actually lived in systems that have socialized medicine, universal coverage, and I've needed hospital care while I was over there. In the UK,
how'd that work out for you?
Oh, it was lovely. Yeah, they told me that I would be put into a year-long queue for surgery on my knee. And by the way, there are 1.8 million people in the UK that are waiting in line to get health care. And after that, I said, I just can't deal with that. Went back to the U.S., had phenomenal care, and now I'm back up, walking around, moving around just fine. What we need to do is drive down costs. We need to use market mechanisms to increase the quality and access to care of Americans, and I think that a critical part of that is tort reform, lifting barriers to interstate competition, but also enhancing civil society and getting civil society organizations to take a larger role, perhaps through tax credits to doctors for providing pro bono care and measures like that.
Okay, Dan, if I can just quote, recently you had a debate with Congressman Hines, and you said, Congressman, it makes no sense for you to vote for a bill that has corrupt deals just to get something done. We should scrap all the bills and start over on health care reform. Is that what you're thinking?
That's exactly right. If you look at what Jim Himes has said, he still supports the so-called public option, which is a massive expansion of government's role in health care. And he even said, even though there are corrupt deals in the Senate bill, he'd still vote for it because he wants to just get something done. That's not what the people of Fairfield County want. What we should do is scrap it all and do the 6 or 7 things that Republicans and Democrats can agree upon. Eliminate denials for pre-existing conditions. Increase interstate competition. Things for incentives for preventative medicine. Electronic medical records. High deductible plans for young people who don't want to pay high premiums. These are the things we can all agree on, rather than the Jim Himes, Nancy Pelosi, let's shove our ideology down everybody's throat.
Rob?
We have to remember that the federal government can't solve all of our health care problems because we're a nation that runs on a federalist system. Okay? The state has to be involved too. And look at Connecticut, where 94% of the people in Connecticut have health care, and Governor Rell has put forward the Charter Oak plan to address that other 6% who don't. And as people are learning about this program, more people are signing up for it. She has successfully addressed that hole in Connecticut. And frankly, it's not the job of the people of Connecticut to be worried about the people in the other states. They have state governments can address this issue as well. From the federal government's point of view, they have to look at it purely as from the role of interstate commerce. And there, we need to encourage competition, portability, and look at tort reform, because these are issues that cross state lines. But otherwise, this is an issue for the states to tackle.
Caller, thanks so much for waiting. You're on the air. Do you have a question for the candidates?
Yes, I do. A core tenet of the Republican Party forever has been smaller government. And I've heard from every candidate, barring one, that they want to limit the size of the growth in government. Even earlier, I heard one of the candidates wanting to limit it to the size of inflation and the growth rate in population. How do you reconcile that belief against the core tenet of the party whose banner you want to carry?
Well, let me take that first. That was Al Alper, I think. Al, thanks for calling in. You know, the core of the Republican Party is actually that we believe in small government. What we don't believe is no government. We don't want to eliminate half of the federal government to actually say we're going to go back to before we had Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid. We want to have small government, all the government we need, but only the government we need. And so, you know, when my opponents have attacked me for saying we should have a federal spending cap, that somehow controlling spending is a bad thing, I actually think that's the core of who we are as Republicans, is that we are going to stop the out-of-control spending, but we're not going to slash and burn and send the government back to the 1870s.
Rob, it's been said the government that governs least governs best. This is a fundamental question. You know, it's easy to say lower taxes, lower spending, but all of a sudden when my kid's daycare is taken away, or the courtesy bus, or lunch rooms, lunch money, or whatever, you know, it's not in my backyard. So how do you balance that?
Well, I mean, someone asked earlier about, you know, what are the distinctions between the candidates, and this is a prime example. I haven't been able to find anyone that believes the federal government needs to grow spending at all. And, you know, I think by your formula, Dan, inflation last year was 2.7% and population growth was 0.9%. So for us to put a baked-in 3.6% increase in the size of government, I think is insanity. You know, we have to recognize the fact that the people are asking to line up at the trough. So if the government puts it out there, we'll come get it. What people don't realize is since 1950, the population of this country has doubled. But the population of people in government has gone up more than 9 times. So you can't tell me that we need 9 times more people in government to cover twice as many people in the population. And it's that mindset of a politician, of the political establishment, that continues to spend money we don't have and to drive up our tax rates. Because even at 3.6%, we're being taxed too much today, and the people are tired of it.
And actually, Marty, I have to respond to this because this has been a direct attack, which, you know, you shouldn't attack other Republicans. It's Reagan's 11th commandment. And the problem is that politicians are actually very good at misstating what somebody said. I just said the maximum amount that the government should ever be allowed to expand is population plus inflation growth, which actually is around 2% right now. And what my opponent has continuously said throughout this is that, you know, in actuality, what Dan DiBasile wants to do is increase the size of government. My record is one of cutting spending and cutting taxes. And if people are going to get into this race, claim they're not politicians, and do the most politician thing around, which is to lie about other people's records, then, you know, we should take a serious look at who should be the candidate for the Republican Party.
Okay. Rob, hold on one second. Rob, I saw Barack Obama when he came and addressed the Republicans, and to give him his props, he came in and said, you know, all this government spending, all of you Republicans in this room attended all those ribbon cuttings, ribbon cuttings when federal money was spent in your district. So, I mean, is there an inconsistency there with Republicans?
There most certainly is.
The bacon,
but they're happy to go to the ribbon cutting to take credit for it. And that's a politician. And, Marty, I think you're looking at the only candidate for Congress in the United States who has a video on his website of him opposing an earmark that's 3 minutes from his house. If you go to my website, russoforcongress.com, you'll see a video of me standing on the Congress Street Bridge in Bridgeport saying we don't need $50 million from the federal government to rebuild that bridge. It's unnecessary. Because we call them earmarks when it's in our district. We call it pork when it's in somebody else's district. Yeah. But if you're like me and you believe the federal government spends too much money, the way we lower that is by saying no to that sort of spending here at home. If we're going to continue to borrow a quarter of our federal budget, this will not end well. We have to only spend money we have. That being said, I'd vote for Dan's plan at the moment because it's better than what we've got at the moment, but it's just got to be the first step. We've got to severely reduce federal spending.
Well,
you know, I think that hypocrisy that we see out of so many politicians, not anything that anybody up here has said, but saying, yeah, you know what, I oppose, you know, the excesses of government, but, oh, except when it applies to my district, except when I can gain political capital back home by promoting these wasteful spending projects. You know, that's why I've come out and publicly said that I will neither request nor accept any earmarks, and in my government reform package, I actually address this issue. I say we need to ban the monuments to me and the airdropping of earmarks. We need to establish a centralized online database that is searchable and downloadable so the average American can scrutinize their government and figure out where it is that their money is going. They will then be able to exert pressure on their political leaders to stop spending recklessly. That's one of the critical ways that we need to rein in government, and also to give confidence back to the American people that their elected officials are doing the right thing.
If you want to know where the money goes, you got to ask Matt Grimes.
Hey,
and Matt,
Marty,
you have a
Marty,
question.
can I address this? I was just accused of lying.
I don't know where the money goes on television. One second. Okay.
And I want to address this.
Okay, you got 30 seconds.
That's
to talk about the.
You know,
lying
we
issue.
talk about the Reagan commandment of not, you know, talking ill about your opponent. And if you're going to accuse me of lying to my face, Dan, at least have your facts straight. All I've done is repeat your words, which say you would limit the growth of federal government to inflation plus population growth, which means you've got a baked-in necessary growth in the federal government.
That's the maximum, Rob. I would love us to see us cut
Dan,
spending by 5%.
You're
twisting my words like a politician.
Dan,
you claim you're not a politician, but you've certainly learned
put it in writing, and you've said it on camera.
that it's a maximum. And I will say it again. The maximum the federal government...
I'll send you your article again that you've been passing out there.
And it says
that
there's a maximum.
That's the difference between you and I, Dan, is you're a politician and I'm one of the people that pay your salary. And the people of this district don't want that anymore.
Rob, speaking of the people of the district, Matt Grimes is here to represent them. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Matt Grimes lives in the 5th District.
Well, work with me on that, Matt. It's public access television. No one's getting paid here.
I'm not sure. I'm not going to put words in anyone's mouth. It was either Senator Russo or Senator DiBasella that said it not too long ago, that everyone is accountable all of the time. And I'm not sure which of you that said that. Probably both of you are going to claim it now that I've told you what the quote is. But
that's right.
Secretary Geithner, should he stay? Should he go? Why?
Good question. We'll start with Rob and follow the sequence.
I don't think he should have been there in the first place. Anyone that's in charge of our Treasury Department and the IRS that can't pay their taxes necessarily has a credibility issue.
Ouch, that hurts. We're in the lightning round. Go ahead, Will.
You know what? I agree 100%. This is a guy that has spent his entire career in government, and I think that we can find better people than just those that have been limited to government.
I'm sensing unanimity on this issue, but Dan, what do you think?
Ditto.
Ditto? Rob?
He had one primary goal, get our economy back on the track. He hasn't done it. He goes.
There you go. Mr. Geithner, don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you. Okay, on that note, caller, are you there?
Yes, I have a question to the two candidates that were state representatives and state senators, currently former. Have you two folks ever filibustered one of these Democrat excessive spending bills when you guys were in Hartford? Thank you very much.
Okay, good question. So it's going to go to, we'll start
let me start with this because I'm actually going to say something nice about one of my opponents.
Really?
Dan has actually been a phenomenal filibuster of some Democrat bills up there. I don't seem to be able to talk as long as you do. You've done done good work.
Does he read the Manhattan phone book, or what's
No, he actually talks about the issue, is the amazing thing, yeah.
No, thank you, Robbie. You know, and Rob was a tremendous asset when he was up there as well in helping us do this. The biggest one, it was not on a financial bill. It was actually a bill to give in-state tuition to the children of illegal immigrants. And that's something that anybody with common sense would say, why would we give a special benefit to illegal immigrants? So I actually filibustered that bill for 8 hours, and it died. And so I was very proud to do it, and very proud to have the helps of folks like Rob Russo in fighting against bills like that.
Okay, so Rob Merkel and Will Gregory, can I say, if you could filibuster, you would filibuster. Is that accurate?
Yes.
I'll take that.
Nobody in the House of Representatives can filibuster anything. I'm a government professor, I'll tell you. You're not going to have the opportunity.
Al Robinson, where are all these Republicans going wrong and set us straight?
Well, I think one of the things where you're going wrong at is that, once again, we got a lot of kumbaya stuff going on. And let me repeat again. You have a convention coming up in a couple of months, and you have a primary coming up after that. This show is not necessarily about telling
what
what
do
you
you
would
mean
do different from Jim
kumbaya? They're
Hollies.
calling each other liars. They're about to go to blows. What's the kumbaya stuff?
That's a good start.
This is Sparks.
Well,
this
that's a
is
good start. That's a good start. Let's
If this is kumbaya, I'd hate to see why.
We're kumbaya here.
Okay, sorry.
That's a good start, but you know, politics is never personal. But you know, again, you come November, there's got to be one nominee. It can't be four. So let's just go back and I want to find out the differences between you candidates, because I'm trying to speak as, although I'm a progressive, I'm trying to speak as a undecided Republican delegate, looking at you four guys and wondering who should I cast my vote at the convention. I want to talk about something, transportation. It's a big topic in the 4th Congressional District, as well as the 5th. I'm a big fan of mass transit. What would you do to fix the problems that we have in terms of Metro North? What would you do to try to get more people on rail and more people off the roads?
Start with Rob.
Well, I think one of the things we should look at is, what's going on with the system now. I mean, Super 7 has been talked about for years. We took these people's land, and then we haven't built it. In terms of the rails themselves, for those to be effective, we have to have ample parking, which we don't have at the stations, and we have to have access to public transportation once they've hit their destinations. So we need to look at those. And from my perspective, I think that needs to be a cooperation between the federal and the state agencies. It's not just, federal government give us the rail system. Connecticut has to step up and take responsibility as well.
Well,
I agree 100%. One of the critical things that we need to do is expand the parking that we have at our different stations. I'm originally from New Canaan, and to get a parking spot at the New Canaan train station takes decades. It's actually a selling point when people are looking at homes, because they usually include the parking space with the homes. And it's a lot tougher, believe it or not, to sell one when you don't have that parking space. So I think that's one of the critical things.
There's some critical issues facing our nation, and I think probably the most compelling and the one that will tug at your heartstrings more than anything is, where am I going to park my Lexus in the New Canaan train station? And if that doesn't motivate you, the uninterested voter, to get up and help those people in New Canaan, because they need a parking space so they can get on the train and get down to Wall Street and make money. Sorry, well, I had to.
Yeah, you should feel very, very bad for all of them, naturally.
Thank you.
But no, I think that this isn't just something that affects New Canaan. This is something that affects many of the towns around us. Fairfield County is what it is today because of mass transit, and to maintain a robust economy here at home. I think that's a critical aspect of it. We need to make sure that we have the good infrastructure at the
that's true.
mass transit level.
Traffic around Fairfield County is just a complete mess, and actually Rob Simmons, who talks about economic development in Fairfield County, says, you have companies that might want to move here. They get stuck on 95 on a Friday afternoon, and they ain't moving here. They're heading to Charlotte so fast it'll make your head spin.
Well, that's
Give
right.
us some time on mass transit. Well, I'm just kidding you.
That's right. There's a right and a wrong way. The wrong way is I'm actually opposed to Super 7. We actually should not be expanding that through the heartland of the 4th Congressional District. And I've been proud to stand with State Senator Tony Boucher against that. What we should do
by Super 7, it's getting a little superer. It's getting to 4 lanes.
Yeah, well, and it's not going to be a 4-lane highway all the way up to Ridgefield, and nor should it be. Right? That is not not going to be the main thoroughfare between 84 and 95, and it shouldn't be.
Okay.
The thing we should do is we should look at 95 and the Merritt and selectively expand those at the choke points. We did it out on the Sikorsky Bridge in the eastern part of the district, where you add an entrance or an exit lane where the traffic actually builds up. That alleviates a lot of traffic. Combine that with parking and a shuttle service down in the Greenwich-Stanford area to actually bring people to their offices, and all of a sudden you're going to improve transportation pretty dramatically.
Rob?
The first thing I'd do if I was concerned about local transportation is I'd tell you to call your state senator and your state representative. One of the reasons we have a spending problem in the United States is because people call their congressman about where they're going to park at the train station. It's not the federal government's job to solve all problems. And frankly, Connecticut gets more than its fair share of federal transportation dollars. But our state legislature has squandered it, and they haven't managed it properly. And frankly, if I'm the congressman, one of the things I'll do is to make sure that that's highlighted and that people know that we're getting our fair share from Washington, but it's the knuckleheads up in the General Assembly who haven't done a good enough job of managing it.
Bob Cernak, the host of Common Sense here on Comcast Cable, what's your question?
Well, I kind of want to just ask a concluding question about the 900-pound gorilla in the room, and that's the economy. I'd like to see whether each of you have 3 solid ideas on how to fix our economy and whether even government should be fixing the economy. But I'll just defer it to each of you.
Well, I think the federal government is a big part of the problem. You look at the subprime crisis that was created by the Community Reinvestment Act that was expanded by Clinton and then implemented by Fannie and Freddie. You know, the free access to money, the taking away of any of the constraints on the mortgage originations. I mean, that's the federal government put those parameters in place, and the banks and the brokers and the buyers just followed right along off the cliff. So we need to get back to a free market system where companies realize that there's a risk of bankruptcy, a risk of failure. They will start to manage their risk more appropriately. Whereas if they feel the government's going to come in and bail them out or prop them up or give them an infusion of cash, then they don't care and they'll take more and more risks with our money. Second thing, we need to stop the federal spending. I mean, I don't care what anyone on this panel says. We can freeze spending immediately. We can find cuts. Medicare alone, $120 billion a year in fraud. There's got to be a way to fix that. Provide liquidity with the banks we already have that have cash already on in their balance sheets to lend to small business, to create jobs, to create wealth, to create tax receipts to help pay down our debt. Private sector, free markets are going to get us out of this, and the government needs to get out of the way.
Will.
Well, what the government is trying to do right now, or what it appears that they're trying to do right now, is create a command and control style economy similar to the ones that we see in Western Europe, and that's not okay. It runs contrary to American principles of freedom of enterprise, and it really runs contrary to our ability to get the economy back on track. First thing that we need to do is repeal the stimulus. Second thing we need to do is cut the corporate tax rate. As I mentioned, I think it stands at 35% right now. I think 10% should be a good target. We also need to, this is something that was suggested by Al Agrisani, who worked under Reagan, provide a $5,000 to $6,000 tax credit to small businesses that create jobs. These are just common sense solutions that I think could really move us in the right direction and create an environment where small businesses are comfortable hiring back again.
Okay, Dan?
2 basic ideas. Repeal the stimulus, cut the payroll tax in half, $1,500 for every middle-class family in their pockets, help small business. Second, put that spending cap on the federal government so there is a maximum that they can spend and actually force them to make the trade-offs that will shrink the size of government.
Robert?
When the federal government mortgages our future to nations overseas, they're not only running us into debt, but they're also devaluing the dollar. The dollar in my pocket, the dollar in your pocket, the dollar in my business's bank account. All right? We have to stop spending money we don't have, and we should look at using tax cuts to encourage businesses to grow their ranks and hire more people.
Okay, prior to the show, by way of ground rules, which we went over extensively and in great detail, we had a drawing of cards for the order, and we had a 1-minute closing comment, and we're going to go in reverse order from where we started. So, Rob, you have 1 minute to make your concluding comment into that camera, give a website or whatever you like. Go ahead.
My name is Rob Russo. I'm a Bridgeport native and resident. You can visit my website at russoforcongress.com. This is a very important election that we've got coming up, and frankly, we just can't afford another 2 years of Jim Himes. If we continue to borrow 25% of our federal budget, it will end badly. We have to stop Washington's out-of-control ways. I need your support. Please visit my website. I look forward to getting a chance to meet you in person.
Dan?
Elections at the end of the day are about more than just Republicans versus Democrats. It's about who we want to be as Americans. And this November, we're going to be able to have a choice between saying we want to be a country that looks to government to solve all our problems, or we want to return the values of small government, free enterprise, and individual liberty back to Washington, D.C. Hopefully tonight you've heard some of the specific ideas that I've laid out for actually controlling spending and getting our economy going. I believe I'm the right candidate to take on Jim Himes in November to give that choice for Fairfield County. Thank you.
We need a fresh start in Congress. We need somebody that's going to go in there that's not afraid to stick out their necks and call out their own party when necessary, but also the excessive waste that we've seen develop not only over the past several months, but over the past several years and decades. We need to make sure that we have somebody that's going to go down in there and reform Washington, that's going to create an environment and work to create jobs, and also that's going to help address the debt. Because right now, we're passing off a massive burden to our young people that they're going to have to pay off. You can visit my website at gregoryforcongress.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.
I think what we're seeing is a culmination of the American people who are finally sick of politicians and of big government. You see the Tea Party movement, you see what's happened up and down the East Coast with these elections, and we're tired. We want our liberty back. We want our Constitution enforced and actually respected. The other people on this panel are nice people, they're smart guys, but they can't get beyond the government thought process. So I'm the guy that can. I'm a small businessman like a lot of you. I feel your pain, and I'm the one that's going to fight to rein in government and actually bring back your liberties. MerkelForCongress.com.
Well, I want to thank all of these gentlemen for coming out tonight. I know all of them are working incredibly hard. This is the democratic process. If you like what you heard, go on the websites, learn more about them, and be part of the process. I also want to thank our panel of experts, Al Robinson, Matt Grimes, and Bob Cernick for helping out with all this, and Bob, especially this table. I like the table very much. And thanks a lot for participating, for those who called in, and just tuning in to Ideas at Work and Beyond. It's been a really fun night, and I appreciate you guys coming out, and by all means, get educated and come out and vote. Thanks a lot. Tune in next week. I have no idea what we're doing next week, but we'll figure something out. And we'll be right here from 9 to 10. Thanks for watching.